A courtroom. February. Cold gray light pressing through tall, unforgiving windows. Vivian Ashcroft sits across from the attorney who wants to take her daughter away. She does not flinch. She does not move. But under the table, her hand is trembling, and she believes no one in this room can see that. Then the judge reads a name out loud. My name. Filed in a formal legal declaration as a consistent, stable presence in this child's life. Vivienne knew I would do it. She never asked me to. She gave me the full truth and quietly let me choose. The opposing attorney objects. The judge does not look up. I am sitting 3 blocks away, making dinner for 3 people. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Tell us where you are watching from and subscribe. Let me tell you how it started. Not with Heiress. Not with the mom. With the door, and the way Vivian Ashcroft opened it the first time, like she had already assessed me through the security camera, and was confirming in person what she had already decided. I had moved into the building 6 weeks before. The kind of building where you feel the gap between your furniture and everyone else's furniture the moment the elevator opens onto your floor. My apartment was small, which the listing had called intimate, and it shared a wall with the largest unit on the floor. I knew she had a daughter because once a week, on Sunday mornings, I would pass them in the lobby, a woman who moved through the world like it owed her a formal apology, and a small, dark-haired child with enormous eyes who looked at everything as if the world was continuously offering her things to be surprised by. She knocked on my door on a Thursday night in October. Heiress was on her hip, already in pajamas, dark hair slightly chaotic from a battle with a hairbrush. Vivienne was in work clothes, charcoal trousers, a silk blouse in deep green, 1 earring in and 1 in her hand because she'd not had time to finish getting ready. My sitter cancelled, she said. I have a call in 9 minutes. I know this is unreasonable, and I will compensate you whatever rate you feel is fair. I looked at Heiress. Heiress looked at me with those enormous dark eyes, and then looked at her mother, and then back at me. I said yes. Not because of the compensation, which I named at a reasonable rate, and she agreed to without discussion. I said yes because of the single earring still in her hand, and the 9-minute deadline, and the fact that she had knocked on my door at all, which for a woman like Vivienne Ashcroft was probably the hardest part of the whole arrangement. Heiress took my hand in the hallway, unsolicited, just reached up and took it. I'm Heiress, she said. I know, I said. You're the neighbor, she said. I'm the neighbor, I said. She nodded, satisfied, and walked me toward the living room. Vivian's apartment was large, composed, expensive in the way that looks effortless because the effort happened at the design stage. The furniture was good, the art was real. There were also, in the living room corner, a very serious collection of stuffed animals arranged around a small wooden table with 4 mismatched chairs, a tea party in progress, or the aftermath of one. The only part of the apartment that looked like it belonged to someone 4 years old, and somehow the most expensive-looking thing in the room because it had been allowed to exist exactly as it was. I am on the call in the study, Vivian said. If she needs something, knock. She looked at Heiress. The look lasted 1 second longer than instructions required, not a handoff, but a reassurance. I am still here. Right there. I'll be right back. Then, she closed the study door. I sat on the floor and accepted the stuffed rabbit Heiress handed me with the gravity of a formal appointment. His name is Tomas, she said. He doesn't like loud voices. I'll keep it down, I said. She poured imaginary tea into a cup that was, I noted, real porcelain. She told me her name was Ramona, which meant I was someone else too. What's my name? I asked. She studied me. Your name is June, she said. Hello, Ramona, I said. Hello, June, she said, extremely formally, and offered Tomas a biscuit that wasn't there. The call ran 40 minutes. By the end, Heiress had fallen asleep on the sofa with Tomas tucked under her arm. When Vivienne came out of the study, she stopped in the doorway. She looked at Heiress, then at me, then at the book I'd pulled from the shelf, A History of Japanese Woodblock Prints. She carried Heiress to bed with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this alone enough times to optimize every detail. I held the hallway door. I didn't watch, because that felt like too private a thing to observe. When she came back, She had taken the other earring out. She looked more like a person, and less like an appointment. She paid me more than we'd agreed. I started to say so. You did voices for Tomas, she said. She described them. She wakes up in the night sometimes. I looked at her. She looked back with clear, unreadable eyes, the kind that catalogued you against criteria she hadn't named. Thank you, she said, for this evening. It was 3 hours and a tea party, I said, not a hardship. That is not what I mean, she said. She went inside. I went home and thought about the look on her face when she'd picked up her daughter. The simplest thing on the most complicated face I'd met in recent memory. She knocked again the following Thursday. Same hour, same situation. This time, Heiress held a different stuffed animal, a bear with one button eye repaired by emergency stitching in black thread, and handed him to me the moment I opened the door, as if the handoff was an established protocol. His name is Gerald, she said. He's nervous about new places. I'll introduce him around slowly, I said. She approved of this and took my hand. That Thursday, Heiress and I sat on the floor while she drew in a small notebook and narrated each drawing in great detail. That's Gerald, she said of one. I see the eye, I said. He only has one. Mama fixed it. She's very good at fixing things. She fixed the bird once. A bird? It flew into the window. Mama held it until it stopped being scared, and then it flew away. I said, I believe you. She went back to drawing. Gerald watched from the coffee table with his single repaired eye. When Vivian came out, she found Heiress asleep on the rug, notebook still in hand. She picked her up from the floor, and I held the hallway door again. When she came back this time, she had changed into a gray pullover, and no earrings at all. She said, I'll put you on the building's approved contact list. For emergencies. You would be the third name. Who are the others? I asked. The building manager and my attorney, she said. Your attorney, I said. My former mother-in-law is on a different list, she said, and the way she said it closed that direction without hostility. I said, I'm honored to be in the company of legal counsel. The corner of her mouth moved, 1 millimeter. Good night, she said. Good night, Miss Ashcroft, I said. She paused. Vivian, she said. Given that you've now met my attorney's approximate substitute. Good night, Vivienne, I said. She went inside. The Thursdays continued. Sometimes a Tuesday appeared, or a Saturday morning call she apologized for. Heiress maintained the name June with the consistency of someone who had done a great deal of thinking on the subject and arrived at a final answer. My name is actually Celeste, I told her once. I know, she said. But you look like a June. June has yellow in it. And sometimes it rains. That is the most accurate thing anyone has said about a month, I said. She nodded. Gerald agrees. By November, I had learned the texture of Vivian's attention. She was not a woman who didn't see the people around her. She saw them extremely well. She had simply decided that seeing was a private act. She noticed I took my coffee without sugar. She noticed when I'd had a bad week the same way I noticed when she'd had a bad call, not by asking, but by the quality of attention she brought to the moment she said goodnight. There was a night she came out of the study mid-call and stood in the hallway outside the living room. I could see her shadow through the gap in the door. Heiress and I were sitting at the window watching rain come down, both of us quiet, the kind of quiet that only works with another person present. Vivian stood there almost 4 minutes before she went back to the study. She did not mention it afterward. One evening in the hallway, she said my name in a way that was not a greeting and not an instruction, just Celeste. Yes, I said. She looked at me for one moment. Nothing, she said. Good night. I stood in the hallway longer than made sense. The mom incident happened in December. I was there on a Sunday. Heiress had asked if June could come for the weekend tea party, and Vivian had apparently decided this was reasonable. We were deep in a narrative involving Gerald's imaginary brother, when Vivian appeared in the living room doorway with a glass of wine. The December light was doing what it does low and amber, making everything feel slightly more significant than it is. Vivian was in a dark sweater, her hair down, watching us with a look I didn't have a word for. Mama, Heiress said. June fixed Gerald's tea. She knew the right temperature. Vivian looked at me. June's very capable, she said. Heiress turned back to the table. she said, without ceremony. I know. That's why I want June to be my other mom. The room held its breath. I felt it in my chest, not the weight of the sentence, but the specific weight of the several seconds that followed. The way Vivienne Ashcroft, standing in her own doorway with a glass of wine, said nothing. She looked at her daughter. She looked at me. It was the look of a woman who had just had a door opened, that she'd been standing outside for a very long time, deciding whether to walk through it or close it again. She said, "Iris, time for bath." Iris gathered Tomas, handed Gerald to me, and asked, "Can June stay for bath?" "That's up to June," Vivienne said. I looked at Vivienne. She looked back at me. "I can stay," I said. "Good," she said. She walked Iris down the hall. She did not correct the mom. She carried it with her the way she carried everything precisely, privately, with full awareness of its weight. Bath time involved water displacement, shampoo negotiation, and a story. Iris had very specific requirements for a horse, a misunderstood witch, something about the sea. The witch was named Araminta, and she was grumpy because no one had ever asked her why. Vivienne sat on the edge of the bath in her dark sweater and listened. "What happens to Araminta?" she asked, once, quietly. "She moves to a lighthouse," I said. She didn't need people to understand her. She just needed the sea. "That's very convenient," Vivienne said. "She's happy there. That's the point." Iris was asleep by 8. Vivienne found me in the kitchen washing our wine cups. She stood in the doorway, then came to stand beside me. She picked up a dish towel. She dried the cups without being asked. She said, "She's never called anyone else that." "Mom?" I said. "Yes." I said, "You didn't correct her." "No," she said. I thought about it. I had the word ready. "And?" She put the cup down. She set the dish towel beside it. She turned and looked at me with those clear eyes in the kitchen light. "And it didn't feel like something that needed correcting," she said. I held her gaze. I said, "Vivienne." She said, "I know." I said, "That's a complicated thing you just told me." "I know," she said. "I have been aware of how complicated it is for approximately 2 months." "Since October?" I said. "Since the earring," she said. "I came to the door with one earring in, and you looked at me like the earring was completely beside the point, and you took Iris's hand and went to the tea party, and I stood in the hallway for 30 seconds before I went to the study," she said. "I am telling you this because Iris named it, and I decided not to correct her, and that decision has a consequence, and I would prefer to address the consequence directly. That is the most structurally organized version of a personal disclosure I have ever received," I said. She said, "I know. I am sorry. It is how I manage things I don't know how to manage." "You don't need to apologize for how you manage things," she said. "I feel as though I do. Because it is not the most open version of how a person could be." "No," I said, "but it's specific. You are very specific. People who are specific are paying attention. I'd rather be paid attention to specifically than loved generally." She was quiet for a long time. She said, "Iris did not choose wrong." "No," I said. She said, "And I did not correct her." "I noticed," I said. She said, "That is what I wanted you to know." We stood in the kitchen. Vivienne said, "I don't know what to do with this." "You don't have to do anything tonight," I said. "It's December, and it's Sunday, and Iris is asleep, and you are holding an honest thing you just said out loud. That is enough for one evening." She said, "You are very steady." I said, "One of us has to be." Her mouth did something. Not quite a smile. She didn't smile easily. The thing that happens just before a smile when the person isn't sure yet whether to commit to it. She walked me to the door. I was in the hallway when she said, "Celeste." I turned. "Thank you," she said, "for all of it." I said, "The earring was a good sign." She smiled, briefly, privately, in her own doorway with her hair down and Iris asleep, and the wine glass empty behind her. The real one, smaller than I'd have guessed, and more devastating than made sense. Then, she went inside. In the morning, I found a note slipped under my door. The same quality paper as everything in her life considered. Quietly expensive. It said, "I looked up the lighthouse. It exists. Pembrokeshire. It has a gift shop and a cafe. I wrote back on a receipt. If Araminta is there, she has probably reorganized the gift shop. An hour later she knocked. Twice, quiet and deliberate. She was in her coat with 2 coffees from the ground floor cafe. She held one out. I remembered, she said. No sugar. I took the cup. She said, I would like to take Iris to the park this afternoon. If you would like to come. I would like to come, I said. Good, she said. The park was cold. Iris ran ahead with Tomas under one arm and Gerald under the other, having decided both were necessary. Vivienne walked beside me with her hands in her coat pockets, and we talked about the library project she was funding in a part of the city that hadn't had one in 11 years, about the neighborhood where I'd grown up, dense and loud with other people's music coming through windows. Iris came running back. Mama, can we see the ducks? There are no ducks in December, Vivienne said. There might be cold ducks, Iris said. Vivienne looked at me. There might be, I said. The corner of her mouth. 1 millimeter. Fine, she said. Cold ducks. There were 2. Iris narrated their interior lives for 12 minutes. Vivienne stood beside me and watched with the simple look, the one she only used for Iris, the one without any of the architecture. She said, quietly. She talks to everything. She gives things the benefit of the doubt, I said. She gets that from her grandmother, Vivienne said. His mother. She was the best of his family. She died 2 years ago. She was the one who kept asking me to stay after he left. And? I said. And I decided to build something here instead, she said. Something Iris could grow up inside that was ours, and not the aftermath of someone else's failure. You did that, I said. Iris is not the aftermath of anything. Vivienne was quiet. Then, that is a very kind thing to say. It's not kind, it's accurate. Iris returned, vindicated by the ducks, and took both our hands without asking, simply walked between us and reached up. I felt Vivienne's gaze on my face from the other side of Iris. I didn't look. I let her look. We had soup for dinner, the 3 of us at the table, set for 3 for the first time. Vivienne made it from scratch, parsnip and ginger, the best thing I'd eaten in a month. When I told her so, she said, I got the recipe from a book someone left in the lobby library. What book? I said. Someone left a note in it, she said. The note was better than the book. What did it say? She looked at me over the soup pot. It said the ending was better than expected. Was it? I said. She held my gaze. It is so far, she said. Iris was asleep in her chair by the end of dinner. Vivienne carried her to bed. I cleared the table. When she came back, I was washing dishes and she stood in the kitchen doorway, then came to stand beside me. Not to take the dish towel, just to stand beside me. She said, Celeste, I am going to do something, and I need to know if it is welcome. Yes, I said. You haven't heard what it is. I know. Yes. She raised one hand and set it very gently against my jaw. Her hand was warm and steady. She tilted my face toward hers by the smallest possible degree, the kind of movement that costs everything because it is so deliberately chosen, and nothing about it is accidental. She said my name one more time. Not a question, not a warning, just the word, specific and certain, in a voice that was not surgical anymore. She kissed me, not frantic, not desperate, patient and deliberate and warm in the way things are warm when they have been waiting long enough to know exactly what they want to be. Her hand stayed against my jaw. Mine found the lapel of her sweater, not pulling, just holding, the way you hold something you have been careful with for a long time and are finally allowed to hold. She stepped back after a moment. Not far, just enough to breathe. She said, I have wanted to do that since November. The rain night, I said. Yes, she said. We sat at the kitchen table until nearly midnight. She told me about the year she had spent in London before she came back to marry someone she had convinced herself was the right choice. About the February morning she had stood in this kitchen with Iris on her hip and understood that the life she had was not the life she had imagined, but that it was, in fact, good, and that good was not a consolation prize. It was the actual thing. When she walked me to the door, she held it open. She looked at me in the hallway with the composure that was real and the openness she had been allowing herself more of since the gym on a rainy November night. "Thursday?" she said. "Thursday," I said. She went inside. I went to bed thinking about the kitchen light and her hand against my jaw and the patience of it. About the word Iris had used, the one Vivian had carried through the whole evening without once setting it down somewhere safer. About how some small people just know. The following Thursday she knocked at 7 with Iris on her hip and said, 8 minutes. I said, "Go." Iris handed me Gerald. I took him. I looked at his single eye. "He knows," Iris said, as if answering a question I hadn't asked. "Of course he does," I said. She took my hand and led me to the tea party. That evening, while Iris drew in her notebook, I thought about the kitchen, about being the third name on the emergency contact list between the building manager and an attorney. About the fact that Vivian Ashcroft had walked downstairs in the morning and come back with 2 coffees and no professional reason to do so. None of it was soft enough to be named on its own. All of it was so specific, it could only be explained one way. I was in trouble by October, if I'm being honest. I didn't finish being in denial about it until December. In November, Vivian had a difficult call and came out of the study to find me not reading but sitting with Iris at the window, both of us watching the rain come down. She stood in the kitchen doorway rather than the living room. She made tea. We sat at the kitchen table after Iris was asleep, and she told me the call had been difficult. Not why, just that it was over and it was difficult. I said, "Did you win?" She said, "I don't lose." I said, "That's not a full answer." She said, "No, it isn't." She picked up her cup. "I won. It cost more than it should have." I said, "The wins that cost more than they should, those tell you something. About whether the thing you're winning is worth the winning." She was quiet for a long time. The rain came down. Somewhere in the building, the elevator moved. She said, "I have been asking myself that question for approximately 4 years." I didn't ask the next question. I let it sit. She was the kind of person who needed to arrive at things on her own terms, and I was the kind of person who could wait, and the rain was still coming down and the tea was warm and Iris was asleep. She said, "That is the most comfortable silence I have sat in a long time." I said, "Good." She said, "You do that deliberately." I said, "What?" She said, "Let things breathe." I said, "Things need air." She looked at me across the kitchen table. She said, "Yes, they do." The lobby library in our building was one of those optimistic installations that appear in buildings wanting to feel like communities. One morning I found a book on the shelf with a note inside the front cover, in handwriting that was precise and not decorative. "I thought this might interest you." No signature. The book was a novel I had mentioned once in passing, 6 weeks earlier, in the hallway. Vivian Ashcroft had been listening for 6 weeks. I took the book upstairs and read it in 2 days. I left a note in a different book on the lobby shelf. "The ending is better than you expect." Also, no signature. Neither of us mentioned the exchange. We simply added it to the language we were building, which existed entirely in the gaps between the words we were actually saying. It was the gap between "good night" and "I'll see you Thursday." The gap between the thank you she gave me and the weight she put into it. The gap between the moment she stood in the hallway outside the living room and didn't come in, and the moment I knew she was there. I had learned, by then, that Vivienne paid attention the way she fixed things carefully, efficiently, with no excess motion, but with full investment in the outcome. She did not perform noticing. She simply acted on what she'd noticed, quietly, in the way that people act when they are not trying to impress you, but cannot quite keep from showing you who they are. She had noticed that I took my coffee without sugar, that I always brought the same canvas grocery bag, that the ventilation in my apartment affected my sleep. I mentioned this once, briefly, and 2 weeks later, the building manager arrived to adjust something in my unit, unprompted, which could only have been arranged by someone on the building's advisory board who cared enough to make a call. I looked at the updated ventilation and thought, she did that. She would never say so. That was the point. The Thursdays layered on top of each other through November and into December, and each one added something to the structure: another Thursday dinner, another bath story, another hallway moment, where one of us said something small, that carried something large inside it. Iris's stuffed parliament grew. Gerald's imaginary brother became a recurring narrative presence. Tomas developed an opinion on weather. The building had rhythms I had come to know by sound. Her heels in the hallway, always 3 minutes later than she intended, always accelerating toward the elevator. The grocery delivery on Thursdays. The study light under the door on nights I was there, steady until the call ended, then the soft click of the door and her footsteps on the hardwood, and the different quality of the apartment when she was back in it. By December, I knew what Vivian sounded like moving through her own home at night. I knew it from the wall. On the other side of the wall, I lay awake and did not tell myself anything useful. The December night after the kitchen, after the jaw and the patient kiss and the lighthouse note and the 2 coffees, I thought about all the things still ahead, the complicated things she had named, and the ones neither of us had named yet. The Ashcroft name, and the legal inquiry, and the gap between our lives that was real, and real, and real. And then I thought about Iris between us in the park, holding both our hands, who had simply looked at the situation and reached up. I thought about how some small people just know. The building was very quiet. Somewhere on our floor, a door clicked shut. I went to sleep. The morning after the kitchen was a Friday. I had not planned to stay, we had not discussed it. And the night had ended at the door, the way nights between 2 careful people end, when neither of them is ready to move faster than the thing their building can hold. But she slipped the lighthouse note under my door at 7, and I wrote back on a receipt, and she knocked an hour later with 2 coffees, and the coffees became the park, and the park became soup for 3, and the soup became the kitchen again, her hand against my jaw, patient and deliberate, earning everything it asked for. After the park, while Iris ran ahead with both Tomas and Gerald under her arms, Vivienne told me about the custody situation. Not all of it, she was not a woman who told everything at once. But enough. His mother, she said. Marguerite. She has been making legal inquiries about Iris's care arrangement. The basis is that Iris lacks consistent secondary figures, her attorney filed in October. Is it serious? I asked. My attorney says the petition is specious, she said. But it is in motion. There is a hearing in February. She paused. She was looking at the path ahead, at Iris running toward the park fountain, with the confidence of someone who had already decided the fountain would be interesting today. I am not telling you this to complicate things, she said. I am telling you because you are on the contact list, and you have been in this apartment every Thursday for 3 months, and you should have the full picture. Why didn't you tell me earlier? She said, because I did not want to seem as though I was offering you a problem instead of a person. I looked at her. Vivienne, I said. You are not a problem. You are a person who has a situation. Those are different things. She was quiet for a moment. Then, very quietly, I have an attorney. That's not what I mean, I said. She said, I know. She said it in the way she said things, when she had understood something accurately and was sitting with it rather than redirecting it. 2 words. That small, that specific. The cold ducks were present as promised. Iris narrated their opinions on the fountain for a full 15 minutes. We walked home through the December light, going thin and orange around us, and Iris held both our hands, and Vivian's gaze found my face once from the other side of Iris, and I let her look. We had soup, the 3 of us at the table. Iris fell asleep in her chair before dessert, which there wasn't, but she had planned to ask for it anyway. Vivienne carried her to bed. When she came back, I was washing up. She stood in the doorway for a moment. Then she crossed the kitchen and stood beside me and took my hand, not to dry dishes, just to take my hand, and held it with the same deliberateness she brought to everything. She said, I would like you to stay tonight. I said, Are you sure? She said, I would not say it if I weren't. She was close enough that I could feel the warmth of her. She smelled of the soup, herbs, and the wine, and something underneath that was simply her, which I had been aware of in small quantities since October, and was now aware of in full. I stayed. In the morning, Iris appeared at the bedroom door, with Gerald under one arm, and Tomas under the other. She looked at the situation with the uncomplicated assessment of a 4-year-old who had been expecting this. Good morning, she said. Good morning, Vivienne said. Good morning, I said. Iris looked at Gerald. Gerald's assessment was apparently favorable. "Are you staying for breakfast?" she asked me. "If it's all right with your mama," I said. "It's all right with me," Vivian said. Iris nodded and went down the hall, already organizing her morning. Vivian looked at me. She wasn't surprised, she said. "I noticed. She has been asking since November when June was going to stay for breakfast," Vivian said. "She said June has yellow in her, and yellow belongs in the morning." I sat there for a moment. I said, "Your daughter is going to be either a poet or a chaos agent," she said. "Historically, those are the same thing." She made coffee. The kitchen in the morning was different. The light came in from the east and did something different to the countertops and to her face. She was in a gray robe that had been worn long enough to be completely comfortable, her hair not yet composed, moving through her own kitchen with an ease she didn't bring to most things. The least armored version of herself I had seen. Not softer, she wasn't soft, exactly, and I didn't want her to be. More like the version of a building when the scaffolding has come down and you can see what it actually is. Iris wanted the eggs that are round. Vivian translated. "She means poached." "I can do poached," I said. Vivian stepped back from the stove. "The good pot is the one on the left," she said. I found the good pot. I made the round eggs. Iris ate them with the satisfaction of someone whose request has been correctly filled. Vivian drank her coffee and watched us and said, periodically, things that were not commentary but participation, small observations about the morning, about Iris's plan for Gerald's imaginary brother, about the frost on the park benches. It was the most ordinary Friday morning I had spent in years. It was also one of the best. The weeks between December and January moved with the quality of time that is building toward something. The Thursdays continued. The dinners became more frequent. I spent several nights a week in the apartment next door, not every night, because we were both people who needed the shape of our own spaces, but enough that Iris began greeting me with the easy confidence of someone whose expectations were being reliably met. She had stopped performing the introductions. She no longer handed me Gerald as a formal credential. She simply opened the door, checked that I was there, and moved on to whatever she needed to tell me about the day, the drawing she had made at school, Gerald's current opinion on the weather, the complicated situation with Tomas, who had developed a philosophical disagreement with one of the newer stuffed parliament members about the proper temperature for imaginary tea. The new member of the parliament was a small fox that Vivian had brought back from a work trip to Edinburgh, wrapped in tissue paper inside her overnight bag, alongside her charcoal suit, and her documents, and her travel-size version of the precision she carried everywhere. She had given it to Iris without fanfare, just set it on the bed, Fox on top of the tissue, and said, "I thought you might like this one." Iris had looked at the fox for a long moment with the evaluating gaze she reserved for potential parliament members. Then she named it Roz and introduced it to Gerald, who apparently reserved judgment, which Iris explained was simply Gerald being diplomatic. The fox was now at the center of the tea temperature dispute. I had been hearing about it for 3 Thursdays. These were the things I knew by January. The texture of Iris's interior world. The particular quality of Vivienne's attention, on an evening when the call had gone well versus an evening when it hadn't, visible only in the half-second before she composed her face into the professional register. A half-second I had been cataloging without knowing I was doing it since October. The way the apartment sounded at 8 in the morning versus 8 in the evening. The smell of the kitchen on a Thursday versus a Tuesday versus a Sunday, each one slightly different because the meal was different and the rhythm of the day that had led to it was different. I had learned Vivian's apartment the way I learned the paintings I restored, not from a distance, not from a diagram, but from proximity and patience and the accumulation of specific detail. I knew which floorboard near the study door made a sound when you crossed it quickly. I knew that the living room lamp on the left cast warmer light than the one on the right, and that this was why she always turned on the left one first. I knew the sound of her key in the lock when she came home later than intended, which was slightly more decisive than the sound when she came home on time, as if she were closing the door on the lateness itself. I knew, by January, that I was home. Not in the sense of address or furniture or key on hook, in the sense that the word means when you have stopped dividing the world into where you are and where you would rather be. I had not said this to her. She had not said it to me. But we both knew it the way you know the things that are already true before they are spoken, the way Iris had known it in November, which was first, which was always. In the mornings when I stayed, Iris appeared at the bedroom door with Gerald and Tomas and conducted her assessment of the situation with the gravity of a small person, confirming that the world was still in the correct arrangement. She never seemed surprised. She had decided in November that this was how things were going to be, and a 4-year-old's confidence in a correct decision is not easily shaken. Vivienne, in the mornings, was the least armored version of herself. Not different, she was always exactly herself. That was one of the things I was most certain of by January, just with less of the scaffolding showing. She made coffee with the same focused economy she brought to everything. She sat at the kitchen table, with both hands around her cup, and asked Iris questions about the stuffed parliament with the full, genuine attention of someone who had been fascinated by Iris's interior world since before Iris could articulate it. She was, in the mornings, a woman who was simply happy. Not performed contentment, not the relief of things going according to plan. Just the particular happiness of being in a kitchen in winter with the people she loved, which was so ordinary and so quietly extraordinary that I had to look at the toast sometimes to keep from making it obvious. She caught me looking once. She said nothing. She looked back at her coffee. The corner of her mouth moved. That was enough. That was, actually, more than enough. In January, Vivienne's attorney came to the apartment. Her name was Brennan. She had the energy of a woman who treated every room like a courtroom in the sense of knowing where the exits were and who held the strongest position. Professional, efficient, unfazable. She reviewed the February situation at the kitchen table, while I sat in the next room doing a very unconvincing job of reading something. At one point she said, loud enough to carry, "The secondary figure argument is substantially weakened if there is, in fact, a consistent secondary figure present." Vivienne said something I didn't catch. Brennan said, "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm observing." She paused. The observer would need to be comfortable being named in the response filing. I came to the kitchen doorway. I said, "What does being named in the response filing involve?" Brennan looked at me with the same assessing inventory Vivienne had, faster, more deliberate. The eyes of a woman who had spent 20 years reading rooms for a living. She said, "A declaration. Your relationship to the child, the duration, the nature of the arrangement. Standard language. It does not require anything more than the truth." I said, "Then yes." Vivienne looked at me. The fully open version of her face, just for 1 second, before the composure settled back. I had learned to read that second. It had become the most important second in any room we were in together. Brennan made a note. "Good," she said. "You'd review the declaration before signing." "Fine," I said. I went back to the other room. Behind me I heard Brennan say something quietly, and Vivienne's reply, also quiet. Then Brennan said clearly, "She's good." And Vivienne said nothing at all, which from Vivienne was a very full response. She stopped calling me June sometime in January. I noticed the first time. We were in the park, the 3 of us, and she fell and scraped her knee, and it was my actual name, she said Celeste, in the small, urgent voice of someone who needed the nearest safe person immediately. I was there immediately. I held her knee and talked her through it matter-of-factly and without minimizing. She stopped crying in 3 minutes. She sniffed. She looked at Gerald. "Gerald says it's okay now," she said. "Gerald's right," I said. She looked at me. "You're not June anymore." "No?" She shook her head. "June was the neighbor. You're Celeste now." "What's the difference?" I said. She thought about it, with the seriousness she brought to every real question. "June was visiting," she said. "Celeste lives here." I looked at this small person with Vivienne's dark eyes and the gravity of someone who had been thinking carefully about things for longer than her vocabulary could quite express. "That's a very good way to put it," I said. She nodded. "Gerald agrees." Vivienne had been 3 steps behind, giving Iris the immediate comfort of the nearest person. She came up beside me on the path. She had heard. She was looking at the way ahead. I said, quietly, "She said you'd know when." Vivienne said, "She's been saying that since October." "She was right," I said. "She usually is," Vivienne said. She said it the way she said things about Iris, with the warmth that existed only in that register, just for this one person, just in this particular room that Iris occupied in her. In January, Vivian also took me to a donor dinner at the museum. The same museum where 3 of her plaques lived, where she had been funding the acquisitions program for years, with the particular commitment of someone who believes in making beautiful things accessible. She asked me on a Tuesday evening in the kitchen whether I would come. I said, "As what?" She said, "As yourself." I said, "That's not what I mean." She said, "I know what you mean." She looked at her wine glass. "As the person I am with." "Is that a sufficient description?" "It's accurate," I said. "Good," she said. "Then is that." The dinner was at the museum's event hall, high ceilings, good light, the specific quiet that comes from being surrounded by things that have survived for a very long time. Vivienne wore a dark green dress, and her hair up, and the watch on the right wrist, and moved through the room with the economy of someone who knew everyone, and needed none of them to know it. She introduced me without hesitation. "This is Celeste." No qualifier, no explanation, just my name, said the way she said things she had decided were true. The people she introduced me to were the kind who responded to information about other people by filing it without comment and moving on, which was actually a relief. A board member whose name I recognized from 3 different contexts shook my hand and said, "Restoration work? We've been thinking about the Byzantine collection." "Vivienne, you should bring her to the acquisitions meeting," Vivienne said. "I'll discuss it." The board member moved on. We stood with our drinks in the good light. "Was that all right?" she said, quietly. "You introduced me as yourself," I said. "You are not a qualifier," she said. "You are the person I am with. That requires no further explanation." We stayed 2 hours. She introduced me 4 more times. Each time my name was said the same way, certain, unhesitating, with the full stop of someone who has made a decision and is living cleanly inside it. In the car home, she sat beside me and took my hand and didn't speak for several blocks. The winter light doing its orange, low, deliberate thing outside the window. She said, "You were comfortable. Were you expecting otherwise?" "I was not certain," she said. "My world has specific textures. I've been restoring Byzantine icons for 7 years," I said. "I can handle specific textures." She turned and looked at me. She said, "You are not a temporary arrangement. You are the person I am with, and my world is going to know that, completely and without apology, because that is the accurate thing." "Vivienne," I said. "Yes. You just told me you love me without saying those words." She was quiet for a moment. "Yes," she said. "I did. Do you want to say the words?" She said, "I have been building toward them since October. I thought you might have noticed." "I noticed," I said. "I wanted to let you arrive on your own." She said, "That is very considerate." She looked out the window and then back at me. In the moving car, in the winter light, with the museum behind us and the apartment ahead. "I love you," she said, with the same precision and certainty and complete absence of qualification she brought to everything she had decided was true. "I love you too," I said. She squeezed my hand. "Good," she said. "That resolves that." "It really does," I said. The car turned toward home. Neither of us said anything else, and neither of us needed to. The February hearing came on a morning that was very cold and clear. Vivienne wore a charcoal suit, sharp, deliberate, the kind that announces itself without trying. Her hair was pinned, the watch on the right wrist. She kissed me goodbye at the door before she left, and the goodbye had the quality of something real rather than something managed. I did not go. Brennan had said my presence would read as a statement, and the statement she wanted in the room was Vivienne alone, which was the stronger image. I understood the logic. I sat in my apartment and worked on a restoration analysis and thought about the charcoal suit and the courtroom light and whether it was doing anything useful for anyone. Vivienne texted once, from outside the courtroom. "Brennan says good morning." I texted back, "Tell her the coffee is on me after." 3 hours later, "It went well, details later, picking up Iris." I made dinner. The kind that required the good pot and the herbs from the windowsill, and some patience, which I had in adequate supply. I set the table for 3. Iris came in at 5:30 with Gerald, and the Tuesday energy she brought after art class, more chaotic, more color-stained, more narratively complex than her other days. She dropped Gerald on the table and said, "Gerald thinks that looks good. Tell Gerald he has good taste," I said. She relayed this. Gerald apparently already knew. Vivienne came in from the hall. She had taken the jacket off somewhere between the courthouse and the door. She looked at the dinner and the set table and Iris narrating Gerald's culinary opinions, and she stood in the hallway for one moment longer than necessary, with the simple look on her face, the one without armor. "You made dinner?" she said. "Gerald approved the menu," I said. She changed out of the suit. She came back in dark trousers and the gray pullover she'd been wearing the first night she stood at the kitchen sink with me, which I did not think was accidental. She sat at the table and told us about the hearing in the shape of it rather than the legal detail, that Brennan had been exactly as competent as advertised, that the judge had asked 3 questions and read the declaration without expression, which Brennan said was better than a face that gave something away. Iris said, "What's a petition?" Vivienne said, "It's a formal request. Someone asked a judge for something. What did they want?" Vivienne looked at her daughter. Directly, clearly, with the honesty she brought to things, Iris asked. "They wanted to make some changes to how our family is arranged," she said. "The judge is deciding whether the changes make sense." Iris said, "Our family is fine the way it is." "I know," Vivienne said. "Gerald thinks so too," Iris said. "Gerald is, as always, correct," Vivienne said. Iris went back to her dinner. The kitchen was warm. The herbs on the windowsill were doing what herbs do when they have enough light. I looked at Vivienne across the table, and she looked at me with the face she was allowing her sliving. She would never be unguarded. She would never be unguarded. It was not the architecture of who she was, but open in the specific way that means someone has decided you are worth opening for. "Thank you," she said, quietly. "For what?" "For the declaration," she said. "The dinner." She looked at Iris and then back at me. "All of it." "You don't have to thank me for all of it." "I know," she said. "I want to." "You're welcome," I said. Iris looked up. "Are you going to be here tomorrow?" "If your mama says yes," I said. Vivienne said, "Yes." Iris nodded and went back to Gerald, satisfied. 30 days passed. The judge ruled in Vivienne's favor. Petition dismissed. No grounds for appeal. Brennan's second message said, "The secondary figure declaration was cited favorably. Good call." I read both messages and went next door and knocked. Vivienne opened the door in her work clothes. Already dressed. Already composed. "Brennan texted," I said. "I know," she said. "She texted me first." "How do you feel?" "Relieved," she said. In the specific, quiet way she said things that cost her something. "Good," I said. "That's the right thing to feel." "Yes, Vivienne," I said. "You won. Iris stays where she's always been. That is allowed to be a full thing." She looked at me for one moment. Then she stepped forward and put her arms around me. Not carefully, not managed. Her face against my shoulder, her breath releasing in the long, slow way of someone who has been holding something for a very long time and has, with full justification, finally put it down. I held her. I said nothing. She didn't need anything said. After a moment, she stepped back. Slightly less composed and entirely more real. She said, "I have a meeting at 9. "Go," I said. "Dinner tonight?" "I'll be here," I said. She looked at me for one more second, then she went. In March, Iris's art teacher sent home a drawing Iris had made during free expression time. The teacher's note said Iris had worked on it for the full 30 minutes without distraction. The drawing was of a house with 3 figures in front of it. Mama, Iris, Celeste. No more Jun. Vivienne handed it to me without comment and watched my face while I read it. "She spelled it right," I said. "She practiced," Vivienne said. She told me she wanted to get it right. I looked at the 6 letters, all correct, earned over however many days Iris had been working on the spelling in her own private sessions before school. "I'd like to keep this one too," I said. "She made a copy," Vivienne said. "She said the original is yours. She has been saying since January that you live here," Vivian continued. She wanted the drawing to say it correctly. Does she know what that means? I said. She knows what it means to her. Vivian set Iris's drawing on the coffee table. I am asking what it means to you. I looked at her. I said, it means I want to stop going home at the end of the evening, not because I have to, because this is where I want to be. She held my gaze. She said, the apartment on your side of the wall is a waste of a good security deposit. I stared at her. I said, Vivian Ashcroft, are you asking me to move in? She said, I am presenting you with an argument and allowing you to draw your own conclusions. That is the most structurally organized version of asking someone to move in that I have ever encountered, I said. She said, I'm aware. What does Iris think? I said. She said, Iris has been telling the stuffed parliament since January. Gerald is fully briefed. I said, if Gerald is fully briefed. She said, he has one eye, he sees everything. I looked at her across the living room. The woman who had come to my door with one earring in her hand and 9 minutes on the clock, who had fixed a bird and a stuffed bear and 4 years of a life she had built alone and decided it could hold one more thing. I said, yes, obviously, since October. She said, I know. I have known since the night you sat in the rain with Iris for 2 hours without being asked. She looked at me. I simply needed to be ready to ask. You have been ready since January, according to Gerald, I said. Gerald is more decisive than I am, she said. That's not true, I said. No, she said, it isn't. She held my gaze with the full certainty she brought to things she was completely sure of. I am very decisive. I simply like to be sure before I decide. Are you sure? I said. I am completely sure, she said. Then so am I said. In April, I gave notice on my apartment. The building manager was professionally neutral about it, which I appreciated. I moved over 2 weekends, not much, because my apartment had never required much, and because Vivian's space was already complete in the specific way that things are complete when someone has been designing them alone for a long time and has developed a deep understanding of what they need. What I brought fit into spaces that had been, I understood slowly, waiting. This was not something Vivian said. She would not say something like that. It was too open, too close to the architectural metaphor, too much like admitting that she had been building space for someone she hadn't yet asked. But the spaces were there. The shelf had room. The hook by the kitchen door was empty. The closet in the hall had a section on the left that had no coats in it, only hangers, which was not the kind of oversight a woman like Vivian made accidentally. I moved the books first. She had reorganized her shelf to make room, aligning spines with the particular care she brought to things she considered worth doing correctly. My books went beside hers and looked, I thought, like they had been there a long time. Not because they were the same kind of books, they weren't. Not always, but because the shelf made room for both of them without either having to diminish itself. Iris supervised the second weekend. She sat on the living room floor with Gerald and Rose and Thomas in a row and offered opinions on where things should go. Her opinions were often logistically impractical and always architecturally confident. The canvas grocery bag went on Gerald's hook. One of my smaller framed pieces, a photograph I had taken years ago of a wall in a very old building in Spain, the plaster, showing its age in the beautiful specific way of things that have been inhabited for centuries, she said, should go in the hallway. It goes in the hallway because it's a wall, she said, with the satisfaction of a 4-year-old who has identified a thematic connection. Vivienne, who had been watching from the kitchen doorway with a coffee in her hand, said, that is actually very good curatorial thinking. Iris nodded. Gerald also has opinions about walls. Vivienne caught my eye over Iris's head. The corner of her mouth, the full millimeter. I hung the photograph in the hallway. It went between the window and the coat hooks, and looked like it had been chosen for that exact space, which Iris informed us it had been, since she had chosen it. The apartment in April was different from the apartment in October. Not because anything had been removed or structurally altered, the furniture was the same, the art was the same, the tea party table was still in the corner with its 4 mismatched chairs, but the light fell differently, or I received it differently, which amounts to the same thing. The kitchen in the morning felt like a kitchen that was used for breakfast, rather than a kitchen that was used for solitary coffee. The hallway felt like a through line between two inhabited rooms rather than a corridor leading to a study and a closed door. The living room, in the evenings, had the quality of rooms that contain people who have chosen to be there, which is a different quality from rooms that contain people who live there because they live there. The choice changes the air. My books went on the shelf next to hers, which she had reorganized to make room without mentioning it. My winter coat went in the hall closet next to the charcoal suit. My canvas grocery bag went on the hook by the kitchen door, which Iris immediately decided was Gerald's bag for when Gerald needed to go to the market, which, apparently, was frequently. On the first morning I woke up as a resident rather than a guest. I lay still for a moment before opening my eyes. I had spent enough mornings in this apartment to know its sounds by then. The building's particular hum. The specific quality of the light at this hour. It came through the east-facing window and landed on the wall across from the bed, a different wall than the one in my old blight apartment, which had faced west and woken me to shadow rather than light. The smell of the apartment was different from my own. Not better or worse. Just specific. The way all inhabited places become specific over time, layered with the particular combination of things that belong to the people inside them. This was the smell of Iris's lavender bath soap and the herbs on the kitchen windowsill and the particular paper Vivienne used for her documents and, somewhere underneath all of it, something I had come to associate with the feeling of being somewhere I was allowed to be. Not invited, not visiting, allowed. The distinction I had noted all the way back in October, and which had been quietly resolving itself ever since. I opened my eyes. The light was doing what April light does, clean and direct, with the quality of something that has been patient all winter and is now, with full justification, present. Beside me, Vivienne was still asleep. She slept with the same composure she brought to everything else, which should have been predictable and was somehow still surprising, not rigid, just settled, like someone who had made peace with rest a long time ago and slept without argument. Her hair was loose against the pillow, which I had come to understand as its own kind of trust. The hair down thing, the willingness to be seen in the versions of herself that had nothing to perform. I looked at the ceiling of the bedroom that was now mine. My ceiling, my wall, my window. The word had taken the whole winter to feel true. I had let it come in slowly, the way you let significant things come in when you understand that rushing them doesn't make them more real, only less careful. But it was true now. The apartment was mine in the sense that mattered not on the lease, which we had discussed practically, and which Vivienne's attorney had handled with the brisk efficiency she brought to everything, but in the sense of belonging somewhere that belongs to you. I thought about the October Thursday. The earring. The 9-minute deadline. The small hand that had reached up in the hallway and taken mine without asking permission, and the ease with which I had given it. I thought about the lobby library note, the lighthouse in Pembrokeshire with the gift shop and the cafe, the photograph now hanging in the hallway by the coat hooks, where Iris had decided it belonged because it was a wall, which was thematically correct. I thought about all of it, and found that I was very glad, not in a sharp or sudden way, but in the particular quiet way of someone who has arrived somewhere after a long walk and sat down and is looking at the view with the full knowledge that this is where they were going. Iris appeared at the bedroom door with Gerald under one arm and Tomas under the other. "You're here," she said. "I'm here," I said. "Good. Gerald says it's better now." She left. We could hear her going down the hall, already narrating Gerald's opinions on the morning light to no one in particular. Vivienne said, from beside me, without opening her eyes. "Gerald is going to be insufferable about this." "He's earned it," I said. She opened one eye. She looked at me. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," I said. "How does it feel?" she said. I looked at the ceiling of the bedroom that was now mine. The morning light came through a different window. The city was doing its morning things outside. Iris was telling Gerald about eggs. "Like something that was always supposed to happen," I said. "Yes," she said. She reached over and took my hand, deliberate, unhurried, her fingers through mine. "I have a 9 o'clock, she said. "I know, but not for 45 minutes. 45 minutes is a long time," I said. "It is when you use it correctly," she said. She turned onto her side and looked at me with those clear gray eyes in the morning light. Not the inventory, not the composure as Wall, just her face in the full and quiet morning, close enough to be the whole view. I said, "You're going to have to wear both earrings before you leave." She said, "I put both in now." "I know. I've seen," she said. "Because now there is someone who would notice." "There always was," I said. She said, "I know that now." She kissed me. The morning was warm and unhurried and long enough. In the kitchen, Heiress was explaining to Gerald that eggs could be either round or flat depending on the mood of the morning, and that today felt like a round morning, and that she expected Gerald to have an opinion before she began cooking. The city moved outside. The tulips were coming up in the park. Somewhere on our floor the elevator opened and closed in the ordinary way of a building that contained its usual number of lives. We were 2 of them. 3, counting Heiress. 4, counting Gerald, who had always known.